John McMullen going to join us to talk a little football. Eagles making news today. Mike Gill, Eitan Shander, John McMullen live on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as the Eagles have decided that they are going to let Nick Foles go free as a bird, free as a bird. John McMullen, something that you kind of predicted. You know, the underlining story apparently would be they could not find a trade partner and therefore have decided to let Nick Foles become a free man.
Yeah, shocker. Anybody who's been listening to the show knew this was kind of the end game. I mean, you have to look at it. I mean, the Bryce Harper thing is a perfect example of this in baseball. You have, in his case, it's an agent sort of using reporters. In the case of Nick Foles, it was Howie Roseman trying to generate a trade market. But then you have to ask the next question. And who's going to trade something and agree to pay Nick Foles $25 million? Because that was the landscape. Just the only way you can trade Nick Foles is to have him under contract. The only way to get him under contract is to franchise tag him. So it was never realistic. It was never going to happen. There was never going to be a market. And the only surprising part was that how he came out so quickly. I could have waited till March 5th. But he didn't even bother, and that's because there was just no path forward. They kicked the can down the road as far as they could.
Right.
And there was no way they were going to generate interest on the trade market at that number.
Right.
So.
Well,
sorry. Yeah.
You said they kicked the can down the road as far as they could, right? So in the end, Howie Roseman says, look, I'm just going to let you kind of get out there. That must mean they had no offers, right? Not the phone didn't even ring?
Well, why would it?
No, why would it?
Right.
Under those terms, look, Nick could generate trade interest if he were under his previous contract, but not with $25 million. Even a seventh-round pick. I mean, people don't want to pay that stipend for that type of quarterback, number one. And, oh, by the way, number two is if you think Nick Foles can play in a system like perhaps Jacksonville might believe because of John DeFilippo, you also only have him for 1 year. And you boxed yourself in from the standpoint of, let's say he does play well. Let's say he plays at a really high level and you want to bring him back the next year. Well, you can franchise him. But that means that number's going up 110% from next year's franchise number. So you got to pay 10% on top of that. It was just, it's not possible from that standpoint. And everybody kind of knew it. And you always put, and I always continuously put, the one caveat on it is the fact that it only takes one organization, only takes one team to make a bad decision. But in this particular instance, it was really difficult to make a bad decision because you didn't have to. And everybody knew the Eagles were up against it and weren't going to be able to trade the guy.
All right, John, serious question. How long before, it's not going to be Nick Foles, but somebody who, I don't know, borderline, might get a job, maybe not get a job. How long before like the AAF steps in and offers somebody a contract as well, like a competing, not in the sense that they would play, but somebody who would be marginal, and now all of a sudden you've got news of another league that's not the CFL doing what the CFL has done in the past?
Well, not when you're talking those numbers.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Like, not Nick Foles, but maybe somebody way more marginal who could or could not be in the NFL next year as far as a free agent quarterback.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see it, certainly from the AAF, because they just don't have the financial wherewithal to do it. And I think even the XFL, they would destroy the salary structure. You're kind of destroying the league. I think the only way that happens is a big name. Johnny Manziel got cut in Canada today for violating terms of his contract. So I think if you're talking about a Kaepernick or a Manziel, somebody of that nature who's already out of the NFL, maybe somebody signs him to get some publicity. But even in that case, you can't pay Colin Kaepernick $20 million if you're the XFL, because, as I said, you destroy the entire salary structure, and you're racing down the road to insolvency. Because once you do that, you can't control it.
There was a lot of news today. Howie Roseman did speak, and so did Doug Peterson, by the way. So one of the things that came out, no timetable for Carson Wentz's return on his back. I mean, does that suggest that he is not doing as well, or that he was more injured than people were making it out to be, because that he's still not ready to do anything?
No, I don't think at all. I think we don't have to say anything right now, so we're not going to.
All right.
I don't think when OTA start in April, I think he's going to be ready to go. I don't think it's going to be an issue at all. And I think he's going to have an entire off season. And that's obviously big for his development, because last year he had to sit out essentially the entire off season as he's rehabbing the ACL and the LCL.
What about Jason Peters' potential return?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. That's probably the most difficult decision they have for a player that's under contract. And they set up the deal where they have to make that decision by March 13th, which was the first day of the new league year. Obviously, we know all the issues on both sides. It's an aging guy who had trouble staying on the field last year. At the same time, it's really difficult to find left tackles in this league. The Eagles don't have the heir apparent. We've seen enough of Vaitai to know he's probably best suited as a backup, and Jordan Mailata is not ready. If people are crossing their fingers, forget about that. So how are they going to get a left tackle for 2019 if they don't bring back Jason Peters? It's going to be really difficult. And then the third part is the number. It looks like a lot, but for left tackles in this league, he's not really that overpaid.
Yeah, outside the money, I didn't mean to jump in to derail, I'm sorry, but outside of the third point, which I think is valid, where you can apply league-wide what you're paying for a left tackle, I wonder and question and hope that you have the answer to this, which is what's weighting more in the Eagles' decision? Is it the play that has dropped off and the fact that they would have to move on, or the leverage that you kind of laid out that a guy like Jason Peters has on top of who he is to come back to the team and say, I want to play another year, and the Eagles looking out and say, well, we don't have a backup, it's not that expensive. So I guess, is that enough to overcompensate for any concerns of his play, or do they really not have any concerns with his play?
Well, I think they're realistic about it, and they understand that he's on the descent, and they kind of know that's not changing at this point of his career. But I do think they look at themselves as a Super Bowl contender. And if you don't have a left tackle, you're not going to the Super Bowl. So if you don't have Jason Peters, who isn't what he once was, isn't at the apex of what essentially is a Hall of Fame career, but he's better than anything else you have or anything else you could probably get in the draft or free agency. I think for a team shooting for another playoff run, another potential Super Bowl berth, ultimately I think they work something out. That might mean tweaking the contract. Remember, Jason's very close with Jeffrey Lurie as well, so that helps. It's not often you can say players are tight with owners. In that situation, you can. So that's another feather in his cap as well. I just don't think to have another option, and for a team that believes they're a contender, that's a position you need to have someone you can count on. And that's, to me, their only option.
Yeah, and I know, they got Mailata hanging around. I'm assuming they're not ready to say, you're ready to play and be our full-time left tackle. And it almost sounds like we like Vitae in the role he's in. We don't want to make him the starting left tackle either. So let's try to get through one more year with Peters if we can.
Yeah, I think that is going to be the ultimate end game, and maybe they draft a young tackle that they can start to develop with Jeff Scout, and then you have sort of more irons in the fire. Maybe Mailata develops, maybe a new person develops, and you sort of tackle it in that way. But I certainly don't think you want Mailata playing with Carson Wentz and his injury history. I don't even think you want Vitae playing at least consistently. And you could do a lot worse than Jason Peters, even though he isn't what he once was.
Some other interesting things here. Howie Roseman admitted that the team is planning on an extension for Carson Wentz in mind, but, quote, we're not going to be risk-adverse in free agency. What does he mean there?
Well, it means that I think they're going to be more involved than maybe people think. Remember, right off the bat, you're getting $20 million back for Nick Foles because they exercised that $20 million option. Now that's off the table. So you see them starting to get money. They're not going to bring Tim Jernigan back at that $13 million figure. Maybe they rework something with them. But it's going to be much less. They're going to try to work out a team-friendly extension with Nelson Aguilar. We just talked about Jason Peters. Perhaps you create some money that way. So this is a team that, as I said, believes they're a contender. And because they believe that, they're going to take some swings and try to bring in players that they think can put them over the top. And we'll see how it works out. So that's what but he also understands they have to budget for Carson Wentz, and the reality of doing business at that position in this league at this time. It's a $30 million contract annually, and you can shape it and do some things with the books and make the cap number a little bit better, either early and sort of backload things. But once Carson Wentz signs that extension, it's sort of a different phase of roster building. You got to be more inventive. You got to do some different things. You got to go about it a different way.
Sorry, man, that's twice. Is there a way in which
he dropped his phone twice?
No, that's my fault. The other time, there is a belief between Mike and I. You want to bring that up now?
I don't believe that John dropped his phone.
Well, at the first statement that you made when you first got on here, Mike thinks that you ended your point, and I think that there was an issue with either you dropped or mishandled or something, or maybe you just placed the phone in a better position.
I think he was done answering the question. You weren't ready to ask a question.
No,
that's not true.
I was done answering the question, and I got Mike Francesa dead air. So
I disagree. We're going to pull that audio, John, because there's rustling in the background. All right? I heard rustling.
The rustling was probably scratching my head saying, where are these guys?
Yeah. Exactly. He sends me a message. He dropped his phone. I said, what are you talking about?
All right. We're going to send it. We're going to email John.
He's like, get that audio. He dropped the phone.
I'm telling you.
Are you out of your mind?
This was not 3 seconds of dead air. 3 seconds of dead air on the radio is a lifetime. This was not that and then the rustling. The rustling coincided with the dead air.
He's telling you he didn't drop his phone.
But
it was like a clunk.
No, Josh is listening to the audio. No clunk.
Yeah, I need to hear it myself.
Let me get into this. Doug Peterson, you tweeted this out. He admitted that Golden Tate's acquisition affected Nelson Aguilar. What exactly, how did he kind of spew that out there?
Come on.
Well, it did. I tell you firsthand because I'm one of those people that thought the Eagles should have played Golden Tate more than they did. And, Nelson's a very sensitive guy, and that got back to him. So you could tell he was upset by it. And Doug admitted it today. But I think the more important part of what he said today was evident. Golden Tate's not coming back. They're not trying to bring him back, and they want to bring Nelson Aguilar back. So Nelson is one of those guys, and if you talk about his first 2 years and how he struggled, and you remember that game in Seattle where he got benched, and he was having some, for lack of a better term, maybe mental health issues, and he was really struggling. And he got over the hump, but he's a very, very, as for an athlete, very, very sensitive. And I think the Eagles are aware of it, but they're also aware of the type of talent he has. And there's no doubt when they brought in Golden Tate, it affected him. And it affected him pretty seriously. And this is the first time we all knew it, but this is the first time the team actually kind of admitted it publicly.
Yeah, John, and I wonder now, moving forward with just what you were talking about with the money specifically, one thing that I was curious about is, are they able to cheat? How much are they able to sneak any type of big spend now this offseason and defer stuff once they know they're going to pay Carson Wentz? And I don't know if it means Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, but to your point of being active in free agency, I wonder if there's a lot of money that can be put in year one to one player, an impact player, and then have that deferred knowing that there's going to be this wink like, hey, we're going to have to sign Carson Wentz, but you're going to get paid a lot up front.
A lot depends on the timing with Carson. And remember, he's eligible for an extension right now. So today, as we speak. So if you kind of kick that can down the road and wait for next season, then I think you create potential problems with Carson Wentz, number one. We just talked about the sensitivity of Nelson Aguilar. You could talk about the sensitivity of Carson Wentz. And
so
we always talk about.
You think that he's going to sign this extension before next offseason?
Yes. I think he's going to sign the extension this year.
But after this offseason?
Well, I think it will probably happen before week one.
Okay.
You generally don't extend people during the season. So I think ultimately it happens in the spring or summer at some point because I think they realize it's coming. And oh, by the way, if you do wait a year, you can look at it both ways and say, well, if Carson shows up and plays terribly, which no one expects, then maybe you make a right decision by waiting. But if he plays well, as everyone expects him to, even if it's not quite up to the standards of his near MVP year a couple of years ago, then the number's only going up. Quarterback salaries never come down. They only go up for superstar quarterbacks.
Well, speaking of which, John, John McMullen at JF McMullen, let me ask you, what do you think? Let's talk about quarterback contracts. What do you think a Foles contract will look like?
I think it's going to be less than people expect. I think it's going to be in the 17 to 19 million annual range because I think the majority of this league thinks he's not a star. He's not. He's more of a system guy. So I think it's not going to be quite as large as people presumed, and that's one of the issues why $25 million was so problematic from a trade standpoint, because teams that perhaps do have an interest, like Jacksonville and maybe the New York Giants, despite what was said today by Pat Shermer and Dave Gettleman, they kind of knew if you get the free agency, it's going to be much more manageable than that $25 million, which, remember, on the franchise tag, that is not only a $25 million salary, that's a $25 million cap hit, and that makes things a lot more difficult.
Real quick, do the Eagles feel comfortable with Nate Sudfeld, or are they now in the market for a quarterback?
Well, Doug talked about that. He said he's not in favor of giving anyone jobs or giving out jobs. I forget the exact wording, but he does want Nate to compete for the backup job. So I think that's where they are. It's going to be interesting. In the past, Doug, think about what Doug is and what Doug was as a player, and how long he was a backup quarterback. He's always talked about having a veteran backup who's had experience playing. Nate doesn't necessarily have that. So I do think they want to bring in some competition. And then the second part is Nate Sudfeld's a restricted free agent. So if somebody else is interested, we all know how, especially young quarterbacks, if somebody likes what they see, that could be more difficult than the Eagles think. If somebody comes in and offers him and it gives him an offer sheet and tries to pry him away from the Eagles.
All right, speaking of jobs, I just saw this, and I'm torn. And anytime I'm torn, I go to you as King Solomon, okay?
Shoot.
There are two.
I'll try not to drop my phone while I'm making the decision.
Well, hopefully it's been better adjusted since the first couple of minutes of the interview in which something happened and you needed to.
The sword of Damocles came out and took off your ear.
And listen, at something, we have the audio, so we'll go back and listen. But there are two, and you can only choose one, two separate food makers, if you will, that are offering and looking for testers, taste testers. Oreo, Cadbury. Which one do you go?
Oreo. For me, it's not even. I'm not a big candy guy, and Cadbury's generally.
No, Cadbury's chocolate. It's just their chocolate.
Yeah,
do I get the chocolate egg filling?
Yes, that's
exactly.
part of Cadbury. Correct. Now, Oreo, you get
Easter,
every single type of Oreo there is.
That's the worst time of year to me for candies. Easter candy. You get all that weird stuff with the cream filling and the Peeps. That's just bad.
Okay.
Yeah, he's out on that.
Yeah, but I'm just talking about chocolate. Forget Peeps. Like
I
the
do
only
like
thing
a Cadbury
you're tasting,
egg. I do like the Cadbury egg, but
that's
I think
what I'm saying.
going
Like
Oreo.
you're only going to get the
Do I
chocolate
get milk?
element.
Do I get milk with my Oreo?
Yeah, I guess.
I get any accoutrement that I want.
This is not a prison you're working in.
About it, you're right. You brought it up, Eitan. I'm thinking traditional Oreos. I don't like all these different flavors.
Yeah, do you want to sit there and eat birthday cake Oreos?
Yeah, you're making a good point there.
And I'm only talking about Cadbury chocolate, which is pretty good chocolate. Now, I'm with you on the Peeps. The Peeps are the banana of candy.
Oh, come on. They're not
banana. What's wrong with banana?
Yeah, what's wrong with banana?
Everything.
They're not serving they're not serving the Oreos at Clark County Jail in 60 Days In?
No.
If you're not eating bananas, you're not getting your potassium. And
no, you can take a pill
cramps.
for that, John. Come on, it's modern technology.
You're going to get those horrible cramps in your legs. And you're going to be sitting on air and having horrible cramps. And
the man knows what he's talking about.
It's going to be like you dropped your phone.
Do you want to know how many supplements there are nowadays? I can get all my potassium in some sort of bar. I'll be fine.
Yeah. Josh is angry. He says, no, synthetic. You stirred up him over there. Come on, man. This is a family
I can get
show.
natural potassium away from a banana. I hate to break it to you guys.
Stand under the sun.
There's other natural sources of potassium.
Josh will tell you the nutritional industries like the Wild Wild West. Now, the FDA doesn't have to approve that stuff. You don't know what's going into your body.
John, let's be honest.
Those supplements.
I'm not talking about some shady one-a-day that promises the fountain of youth. I'm saying that there are plenty of other natural sources, including vitamins, in which I can get potassium in my body outside of a filthy, nasty, stinky banana.
Try a Blue Chew, all right? Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike. That's Eitan, John McMullen. A lot of Eagles news. For more, John has the story posted at 97.3ESPN.com. We will accompany this audio with that piece so you can read it and listen to it. John, take care, man.
Thanks, John.
Going to drop my phone. Thank you, guys.